Hello, good evening, and welcome to NFBC News. To celebrate the 4th of July today, we will be highlighting the events that have happened in the past 15 years of this great nation. Experts we have today, Nathan and Carl. I would like to present a huge thank you to Gleam for sponsoring today's broadcast.
Those videos certainly highlight some communist plots for sure. What do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, those Reds don't know what's coming up.
Ooh, speaking of how about we recap the last 15 years worth of aeronautics in the space race?
Well, I quite like that idea. Let's go to Nathan, a real expert on our progress of pummeling those commies way up in space.
Alrighty then. Nathan, how did the battle with the Reds go?
Well, in space it went quite well, John, if you're referring to us beating them to the moon and back. By the way, do you have any questions about that for me?
Yes. What exactly is NASA, and what have they done?
Well, in a historical sense, NASA is our God-given country's general space agency, and was founded on July 29, 1958, during the Eisenhower administration. They are a science, engineering, and research division of our government that focuses on various space and general flight topics.
Can you tell me more, Nathan? Just why and what it has achieved in those 15 years?
Well, in these last 15 years, after NASA was formed out of the NACA, the U.S.'s former aeronautics division, it has achieved multiple successful rocket launches and projects, such as the Mercury project, which has the first human American spaceflight program, running from 1958 to 1963. The Gemini program, which focused on the development of space travel techniques, and last but certainly not least, Apollo, which had the goal to get a man on the moon before 1970. And was so successful, we achieved it, and landed a man on the moon, and brought him back.
That sounds quite nice to me. And how are the Soviets doing this space race?
Great question, John. You see, they were succeeding in the beginning with things like the Sputnik satellites, with Sputnik 1 being launched on October 4th, 1957. At around the size of a volleyball and weighing 184 pounds, it orbited the Earth over 1,400 times in the span of 22 days, before its zinc battery ran out. It was a massive step towards discovery for all humanity, along with the Reds having the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, who went up on the Vostok 1 on April 12, 1961, and orbited the Earth a measly one time over the span of 12 minutes. But while they were busy with these trivial firsts, we were busy designing more powerful rockets and focusing on the future of our great country's expanse to space.
So you're saying that we lost to the Soviets, Nathan?
Absolutely not, Daniel. While those Soviets were busy putting the first satellites and people in space, we were designing and developing amazing American technology, such as the ability to dock craft in space, first done by the wonderful and well-known Neil Armstrong, along with the incorporation of special liquid fuel engines for giving you more bang for your buck.
You see, I told you those Soviets don't stand a chance against NASA, Daniel.
I never had a single doubt, John.
Hey Nathan, speaking of Neil Armstrong, you should walk us through the legendary moonwalk a few years back.
My pleasure. It all started with the promise made by John F. Kennedy, in which he wanted us to land a man on the moon and back before 1970. After the resounding success of the earlier Apollo programs, excluding Apollo 1, NASA launched Apollo 11 with 3 astronauts, Commander Neil Armstrong, Lunar Module Pilot Buzz Aldrin, and Command Module Pilot Michael Collins.
Mr. Armstrong, I saw him at his homecoming parade in Ohio. And what do you mean, excluding Apollo 1?
Well, Daniel, unfortunately, Apollo 1 was the first time human lives were lost in U.S. spaceflight history, with a fire that started in the capsule while it was grounded during a rehearsal test. The fire claimed the lives of all 3 astronauts in the capsule, Ed White, Gus Grissom, and Roger B. Graff. Yes, it was a truly tragic accident. And as for Mr. Armstrong, while he was the most celebrated person for sure, we can't forget about Dr. Rendezvous himself, Buzz Aldrin, who held a Christian communion after Armstrong had to manually touch down on the moon due to a failure in their autopilot. You see, the Apollo 11 took 76 hours to arrive in the moon's orbit, and landing the Eagle took another 24 hours. bringing the total up to 100 hours just to land on the moon.
That's a long time. I sure hope they were comfortable during the ride.
And I can't even survive 3 hours in my vehicle.
Well then, do I have some bad news. The 3 astronauts lived in a 210 cubic feet of space, which is 3 people sharing a shower room's worth of area, surrounded by loud equipment, which kept them awake the entire time. Speaking of loud and obnoxious, back to you, John.
Well, thank you so much, Nathan. It looks like everything is going as normal. The Reds are no match for us in space. We changed to Cuba and the DR with our expert Carl here to explain how we put those Reds down in the DR and Cuba incident after our commercial break.
Come on, Timmy, let's go.
Hold it before you blast off. You brush your teeth. There's the gleam.
Your mother's always making you do that.
Yeah, but I bet I get less cavities than you.
Yes, mothers who care know one sure way to help fight decay is to brush right and use Gleam. You see, a harmful deposit called plaque forms on teeth. Proper brushing with Gleam removes most plaque. So remember, one sure way to help fight decay is to brush right and use Gleam.
Thanks to Gleam for helping us keep our teeth clean. Moving on to Cuba, Carl. How about you tell us about the events that unfolded there?
Thanks for having me, Daniel. Cuba was originally led by dictator Fulgencio Batista, who held anti-communist views after he forcibly took power in 1952. Batista fled the country later when he was overthrown by Fidel Castro, who used guerrilla warfare tactics in what was known as the Cuban Revolution.
Whoa, wait. How did Cuba get overthrown? I thought Batista was a good leader and ally of the U.S.
Well, he was well liked by the U.S. for his anti-communist views, but as a leader, he led Cuba by suppressing political opponents. We also have to keep in mind that the government under his control was filled with heaps of corruption, such as rigging elections, controlling the press, embezzling large sums of money from the economy, and bribery.
I guess Castro must have done some horrible things to be worse than Batista.
Well, Castro initially had views for democracy and justice in Cuba. Still in all, once Castro had power, he changed his views and led a one-party government who controlled it all. Quite the opposite of democracy. Additionally, Castro held distaste for the U.S. for being imperialist. Some reforms that came with Castro were electricity for rural places, free healthcare and education. The thing is, he was also getting rid of the free press, and imprisoning or even killing those who opposed him. As a result, many Cubans left Cuba in fear.
Castro's also done deals with the Soviets to get oil for sugar. And we also had to do something about it. Let's talk about the Bay of Pigs invasion with President John F. Kennedy, who used an Eisenhower administration plan and the CIA with Cuban exiles.
It was seen more as a humiliating embarrassment to the Kennedy administration as they failed miserably to take the area known as the Bay of Pigs. The Sent Force's objective was to fight through the weakly defended Zapata swamp and set up a rebel government in Trinidad to overthrow Castro without it looking like the U.S. was involved.
It certainly sounds like a good plan. I heard the CIA was even able to equip the rebel forces with disguised bomber planes, additional Air Force backup, and even a landing craft for all 1,400 rebels.
That's right, John. But the main issue was that Fidel Castro had already heard of the Cuban rebels preparing in Miami, Florida, long before the invasion, along with many mishaps that occurred. The disguised bomber planes missed their targets, allowing for the Cuban Air Force, combined with 20,000 enemy troops, to weaken rebel forces. Additionally, the bad weather heavily damaged rebel forces, and the U.S. Air Force backup missed the invasion by 1 hour due to the time change.
Well, surely one battle doesn't mean much in terms of an entire war, does it, Carl?
Daniel has a point. From what I have heard, Operation Mongoose was no good, but we did a great job to weaken the Soviet infrastructure while spreading some publicity on how great this nation really is. We even had some plans to take out Castro before it was stopped by the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Sure thing, Daniel. We also have to consider that this entire conflict led to a close encounter with nuclear war and human extinction. The Bay of Pigs invasion and Operation Mongoose can be viewed as successes or failures, but the USSR saw it as a threat of their ally and reacted by building nuclear missile launch sites.
The US was also at DEFCON 2, where not only all means of war are prepared, but a full air force and nuclear missiles were ready in just 6 hours. At the same time, USSR was ready for a total war at the same level. That sounds really intense. So how did the public react?
Sure thing, John. You see, reports of the public opinion during this crisis found that those who believed that foreign affairs were most important surged to 72% from a 32% during this time. It also looks like people were frightened, as thoughts about the atomic bombs and the fallout also drastically increased from 27% to 65%. However, through this time, it was reported that people's lives didn't change dramatically as a result of the crisis, and most citizens remained calm.
So my understanding is that the conflict ended early as Kennedy and Khrushchev both agreed to remove their nuclear weapons. The Soviets also removed their weapons from Cuba, and the US removed theirs from Turkey, with obligation for the US not to invade Cuba. But there's still this talk about Cuba and not a drop about the DR?
Well, the Dominican Republic was like a Cuba that never fully shed its shell. Similar to Cuba, there was a dictator, Rafael Trujillo. Trujillo was a terror. He jailed, tortured, and murdered those who opposed him. Eventually, Trujillo was assassinated by several gunmen on May 30th, 1961.
Huh. That sounds quite familiar. Also, didn't the United States dislike Trujillo?
That's right. Trujillo's relationship with the U.S. degraded over time as the U.S. questioned his ethics and eventually pretty much broke diplomatic ties with the Dominican Republic. After Trujillo's assassination, Bosch, who led a reformist government, took power, but in 1963, he was overthrown by the Dominican military who disliked his views, and the struggle between Bosch supporters and Bosch opposers for power began, also known as the Dominican Revolution. The U.S., seeing this, believed that it was a scheme that Castro started and was afraid of the creation of another Cuba.
That's my Johnson. Speaking of, here's Lyndon interviewed by my best friend at BBC News.
I reported to them on the serious situation in the Dominican Republic. I reported the decisions that this government considers necessary in this situation in order to protect American lives. The members of the leadership expressed their support of these decisions. The United States government has been informed by military authorities in the Dominican Republic that American lives are in danger. These authorities are no longer able to guarantee their safety, and they have reported that the assistance of military personnel is now needed for that purpose. I have ordered the Secretary of Defense to put the necessary American troops ashore in order to give protection to hundreds of Americans who are still in the Dominican Republic and to escort them safely back to this country.
Well, with that beautiful video recording, we conclude our broadcast as we have covered the U.S.'s triumph against the Reds with a common theme of the history of our great nation, victory over and over again. A special thank you to Carl and Nathan for joining us on NFBC News today. Thank you, and good night.